Negative space is the space that's in between and around all positive space. Positive spaces are the objects that you're going to actually draw, right? Thelonious Monk, has anybody ever heard of him, the jazz pianist? Okay. He talked about it wasn't the notes that were important, but the space in between the notes. Think about that sometimes when you're listening to music. It applies here as well. And so I'm going to draw probably the space in between here with the ladder and the hoop and whatever, the cylinder. We're going to draw the spaces between that and around that, okay? So this is one area where we don't have to worry too much about line quality because most of it's going to get covered up when we shade over it with either a Sharpie marker or like Vine charcoal or compressed charcoal or whatever. So I'm going to first draw the negative space and then I'm going to color it in, leaving the positive space as white space of the paper. It's real easy to not get this, but once you do get it, it tends to work pretty well. You can still use your measuring tools and all of that. And if you look, the negative spaces literally are shapes within shapes. And they have proportion and angles and all of these things. Where a positive space overlaps another positive space, you will not draw that area. You just leave it very blank. So for instance, the hula hoop is behind this cylinder. I'm not going to draw the cylinder where it overlaps the hula hoop. Okay, drawing the little spaces in between and around. And it's okay if some of the lines are a little off right now, because I can still come back and make corrections, just like we do when we do the gesture drawings. Does this make sense to you, everybody?
Yeah.
Okay. The negative space is super important because you can actually measure that space, and you'll mainly find out, after you've done gesture, angles, proportion, placement and proportion. A lot of times you'll find by looking at the negative space that something is off that you may not have seen if you were just looking at the positive space alone. So now I'm drawing these negative shapes, and once you draw them in, the positive space shapes will be there. Try to avoid drawing in the positive space and then going back and erasing where they overlap. That's kind of not the point. We're trying to train ourselves to see the space in between objects. And it can be very tricky, but it can also just be a very useful tool. And I'm going to come up here. Now, in this instance, I'm catching that edge, so it's falling off the page, so I don't have to worry about that. And again, when we see little things like little details like this on the positive space, or when something's overlapping, or something like this, we're just not drawing it. We're not thinking about positive space. We're thinking about negative space. It's kind of good too, I think, to zoom in to make these almost unrecognizable, kind of abstract. There's still angles here. Okay, that's like 8 o'clock-ish. Like that. It comes down and then across. What I'm trying to do now is the edge of the page and the negative space that's around the ladder. If you get the large Sharpie markers to fill in your negative spaces, they tend to look really good. However, if you have a classroom full of Sharpie markers, everybody gets funky and it's not good. And so we tend to avoid doing that in class. But if you're just a person at home drawing this, a Sharpie marker will look nice. It's good to make those edges really crisp. It's very tempting to draw the positive space. Now, technically, that is okay. I can see right through there. And that's the only other negative space I'm seeing. So right there, things line up too. Positive spaces do line up. You do have to think about them in those terms. So that line needs to come through here, pow, right there. And I'm good to go here. So now what I'm going to do pretty quickly once we have this established, so I'm going to come in. This is Vine charcoal. It's going to be pretty messy, and it's going to get your positive spaces. The charcoal is going to flake off. Try not to wipe them with your hand. If anything, just gently blow the charcoal off. So I'm going to take some of this Vine charcoal, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. I did put a piece of tape around the paper to kind of create like a little frame, just for presentation purposes. I think compressed works a lot better. Is there any compressed charcoal over there on the desk? No. Try to make these edges really crisp. Now I'm moving pretty fast here. You don't have to try that at home. So I would suggest a Sharpie marker. The good thing about the Vine charcoal is it erases so easily. And so if you make a true, mistake, and you see a space and fill it in and then realize it was a positive space, then it's easier to fix it with this than it is compressed or a Sharpie marker. The problem is it's a little sloppier than both. It's hard to get the crisp edges. Darkening every negative space that I see. It's all important, even the little spaces. Now, I could keep going with this the whole way around, but it's going to take a little while to get there. And I keep dropping this charcoal. It's real easy to do. I'm almost done, so go ahead and see this through. There we go. Nice big mistake. Don't fret. So a negative space drawing is going to look way different than all the rest of the drawings we've done. And this is a little rudimentary. It's going to give you the idea of what we're looking for and what we're trying to see. All of these spaces right here end up creating what's up there, right? And you have to think about the fronts and bottoms or fronts and sides of objects and consider those in your thicknesses. Now I can take my kneaded eraser and really crispen up these edges and clean this up a little bit just for presentation purposes. Now if you use a Sharpie, you won't have to do that. But the Von charcoal erases so easily. This is pretty nice. Okay, does everybody get the idea? Okay.